Welcome back to Nightcap Chat, the pop culture, comics, and gaming podcast. Today we are talking back issue bin comics.
Yes.
I'm Blade O'Neill.
I'm Ken Brown.
And before we delve into this, just want to take a second to thank you all for consistently listening. You know, like we do see, all of our podcast statistics. We appreciate all your support. Don't forget to continue to like and share and subscribe. And, we're always looking for your input on social media. So, whether you're on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, tell us what you like, what you don't like, or, what you want to hear more or less of, because we want you guys as involved in the conversation as we are.
Yeah, we want you to be as part of this as we are. And it's a blast to be able to do this for just hanging out with me and Blade, but at the same time, the more interaction, I think the better the show is going to continue to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we want to bring you the content you want to hear. So for today, we know we talked a lot about what's going on in today's comics, what's going on with the movies, and sure, I mean, like that's easy to talk about. It's what everyone talks about, but as comic book fans, I like some of the old stuff.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, back issues, man, dude, when I started collecting, I realized that back issues weren't so easy to find.
Okay.
And 258 of Spider-Man was the first major comic that got me die hard into I want to read more.
258
of
for
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Yes, dude. I apologize.
So what's the significance of that issue
for me? It was seeing the black suit Spider-Man.
Okay, so that's what hooked you in.
Yes, and the red suit Spider-Man were more or less doing a ragdoll tug of war with Peter Parker on this black spiral cover with looks like space going around him. And it turned out the main thing was a dream story. But as Peter sleeps, he dreams, and in the dream, it is him having a subconscious, what's going on with this costume. And while he's dreaming, the suit took him out web slinging on his own and fought a little bit of crime while Spider-Man slept. I'm going, what the heck is going on here?
I think the 90s cartoon touched on that, didn't
Absolutely,
they?
yes.
Because I remember those episodes, or episode.
Yes, and that issue was wow, first of all, this costume's awesome. Mm-hmm. The bad part about it was they referred to Secret Wars #9, which got me into reading Secret Wars as well, because that issue wasn't even out yet. And because the way that they did the timeline was Secret Wars was supposed to explain all these changes that happened back in 1984 in the Marvel Universe. Mm-hmm. Like She-Hulk was a member of the Fantastic Four. Why did Thing quit the Fantastic Four? Why is Colossus and Kitty Pryde's relationship on the rocks in X-Men? Why Spider-Man got this really cool new black costume? Who's the new Spider-Woman, Julia Carpenter? Where'd she come from?
So all of these things happened in
Secret Wars.
Yes, but it was presented before Secret Wars even explained it?
Yes.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, it's kind of like 1 year later, DC did, back before 52 ended.
Okay.
And it's the 1 year, 52 was supposed to explain what happened in that 1 year. And it was a weekly series that ran a whole year. Secret Wars, that premise was first used for the first time that I'm aware of, where Marvel did all these changes in their storytelling. And Secret Wars was the 12-issue miniseries that you needed to read to explain why all these changes happened.
Wow.
And the black suit Spider-Man was the big deal event that happened in Secret Wars. That what the heck, dude? In Marvel Comics, all of a sudden Spider-Man shows up in this black and white suit. Where did it come from? Well, you got to read Secret Wars.
I can't believe I didn't know about that. Like what an interesting way of doing it. It was almost like they Quentin Tarantino'd you or something.
Yes.
You know,
it's like that. It's you had to go read the prequel to understand what was going on in the main story on right now.
That's really fun.
Because in issue number 251 in the April books that came out in 1984. Which was what they did was they had more or less shelf dates, because the month date on the books were the shelf dates that once that month hit, you could return it for credit from your distributor. And so the April comics came out in January. And so you had 4 months to sell through your stock, and whatever you didn't have, you can apply to your distributor for for credit from a percentage back for what did not sell to kind of keep
what did they do with those
going.
comics?
they would strip the covers or cut off. That's why there's so many comics that have the missing title on it.
Yeah.
Or no cover at all. Was you had to send at least the title of the books you wanted partial credit back for. And that was...
I'm making a face right now because I don't know what to say.
Yes, that's why there's a lot of, you see, like in older comic shops where growing up, back issue bins without covers.
Yeah.
It's because they were getting credit for what they
I always
sell,
thought it was just like
credit.
they were falling apart because they were like heavily played with or whatever. Interesting. Wow. I'm learning all kinds of things on today's episode.
And so May 1984 was the same cover date as Secret Wars #1. And May 1984 was the same cover date for Spider-Man number 252.
Okay.
And so issue 258 was this big resolution of like, there was a lot of bad fan feedback on them changing Spider-Man's suit. The purists did not like the black and white suit at all. And this was a thing Marvel in the 1980s was trying to make an era change that, okay, it's been 22 years of us going status quo on Spider-Man. Let's do something drastically different. And it was mostly for the toy line because Mattel was doing Secret Wars action figures back in the day. And they asked Marvel to create new looking versions to attract it. This is different than anything that's ever done before in toy action figures. And Mike Zeck was in charge of designing some of the new toy designs that were used. Because do you ever see the Secret Wars action figure packages?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and they're even like kind of reprinting them now.
On covers during the Secret Wars.
Yeah. Not only that, but those, they're doing that line of action figures that look like the Secret Wars style boxes. You know what I mean?
Those are the 1990s Toy Biz figures they're homaging there. Because in the 1990s, they did four and a half,
90s.
Yeah, 4.5, 5-inch action figures.
But
Remember those?
But this art is not.
That's not Secret Wars. Yeah.
So it's just on the comic books then.
Yes. Well, the Secret Wars, like they did the homages to the Secret Wars packaging during the Secret Wars Jonathan Hickman series that came out a few years back, where they did like the Deadpool one because that one was never done before. But they were blue carded.
Oh, yeah.
And they had the shield.
That's right. Yes.
Yes. And they did a gimmick where they had the Revelation shield that they battled with the toy. But on the back of them, there was a little small mini Mike Zeck strip for each character.
Yeah.
And Bob Layton, I think, did some of them too as well. But those were the main push of what the Secret Wars comic series was supposed to do to help Mattel with this toy line that they were developing.
I still put them... like in my mind, I lopped them in like a similar category because this wasn't too long after, and it's still kind of that.
It's still nostalgic.
That style.
This right here.
Yes, yeah, and what I particularly like about the, not to get too far off topic here, but this, I mean, they're doing the '90s card backs, but the action figures are still cool sculpts.
Oh, they're absolutely amazing. They're like modern sculpts.
But like, there's this trend right now where they're redoing like the old He-Man figures, and they're those clunky. And I understand the nostalgia, and there's a market for it for sure.
Yes.
But I think it's cooler to still have the cool sculpted figure and keep that old school packaging.
The throwback card. I really do hope they do something like this with the Secret Wars theme.
Yes,
because that would be unbelievable.
So cool.
Because it's 35 years of Secret Wars this year. And it's also become, instead of them, it's funny because I think they did Secret Wars a couple of years too early.
Yeah.
The Jonathan Hickman series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that one came out, I think, in 2016. And it was, not quite the right time frame of it being the 35-year anniversary. But yet this year, they're so focused on symbiotes.
And that one was so its own thing from what I understand. Like the whole weird thing with like Captain Marvel or Miss Marvel or whatever she was called at the time.
And that may have been to reopen for the 80th anniversary of Marvel this year. Like they wanted to establish something where everything was available for the 80th anniversary of Marvel. And that's what Secret Wars technically did back in 2016, is it made access for Marvel to touch anything they ever created in the past if they wanted to.
Yeah, and, I mean, that's fair.
And but the 80th anniversary of Marvel is this year. And there also is the 35th anniversary of Secret Wars, and introduced the black suit Spider-Man.
Yep. And
since the symbiote is now 35 years old, they've done tons of stuff with Venom this year. Absolute Carnage is a big deal. Mm-hmm. They did a Peter David symbiote Spider-Man miniseries. Mm-hmm. And that technically all goes back to Secret Wars, this throwaway comic series just to promote toys and changes in the Marvel Universe. And they did Secret Wars 2 a year later. And that was a complete flop because they brought the Beyonder to Earth. And the Beyonder was the guy that was this maleficent god that wanted to see what it was like if superheroes and supervillains had to fight for survival on his world he made. But I'm going way off topic here. I apologize. But the Black Suit Spider-Man came out of that story.
I have all of Secret Wars 2 in the next room. And then
some funny things happened in that book were hilarious too.
When you find them in 50-cent and dollar bins, you're just like, whatever. Like, let's just see, so I have that set, and I have, if not all, most of the Secret Wars 2 crossover issues where it has the little corner like Secret Wars 2 crossover. But I mean, the Beyonder is a pretty abstract character.
Yes, I love how he wanted to be a human. It's like, what's the perfect human? All look like Steve Rogers, Captain America. Then all of a sudden, as the story goes, it's like that Steve Rogers. Like, I know that's like, this person's not that big of a deal. And they go like, well, who's the most popular person on this planet then? And they go Michael Jackson. And so he makes himself look like Michael Jackson. Remember that? Where he had the curly hair and he wore the Michael Jackson outfits.
Is that? I did not realize that's why he looked like that.
It was hilarious. And he started he saw Dazzler performing at a concert and he fell in love with Dazzler. You need to be my wife. And it was just really kind of so cheesy, campy fun to read that series. And then by the time it was over, it was like, I'm just way too powerful. And he got corrupted by more or less human ideals. And so he says, I'm just going to destroy this world. So Molecule Man, I need you to kill me. And made this machine for his own suicide that Molecule Man executed his more or less existence. Like destroyed his existence by the time the story was over. Like almost made him back into a baby and killed him when he was a baby. That way he wouldn't develop all this power.
Wow.
So super crazy story. But that's like, okay, let's finish off this Beyonder story that they started in Secret Wars. And they thought it was such a great idea. I mean, Jim Shooter, as much good stuff as he's done in Marvel back in the 80s, he wrote both Secret Wars and Secret Wars 2. The way that he kind of flopped on Secret Wars 2 was kind of a weird ending to that Beyonder saga.
That is weird, but you talking about this like really like in an upcoming podcast, I think we should talk about just some of these more like Marvel is trying to do abstract characters with like the Eternals and they did with Guardians of the Galaxy, but like it'd be interesting to talk about characters like Molecule Man.
Yes, dude, one of the most popular
powerful
characters. I bet
very powerful,
but not popular at all.
But, I don't think a lot of people are aware of Molecule Man.
No, not at all.
Molecule Man could probably kill almost anybody.
Yes.
Or characters like Codpiece in
Hickman
DC.
used him in that new Secret Wars to work with Reed Richards and Doctor Strange to create the current Marvel Universe.
Interesting.
And so that's kind of interesting thing too, is like that Molecule Man is still out there, but he's afraid to participate with the world.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, well, that'll be it for another time here.
The black suit. I'm sorry to finish off there. The black suit Spider-Man was so enamored to me. I wanted to read more. And 258 of Spider-Man came out before Secret Wars number 8.
Yeah,
and so Secret Wars number 8 had a December cover date on it. And Spider-Man number 258 had the November cover date on it.
Okay.
So the backlash was so bad on the black suit Spider-Man, Marvel hastily decided to put him back in the red and blue suit even before Secret Wars was over. And then they're kind of going like, well, the whole point of Secret Wars was to show all these changes in the Marvel Universe. So by time Secret Wars ended that same month was an April cover date for Secret Wars 12 of 1985. And Spider-Man number 263, they put him into a cloth version of the black and white suit to try to appease the people that were getting introduced to comics. So I think that's why Secret Wars became a huge flop, was they had all these great ideas, but the fans, that was the first, I guess, pre-social media backlash of letters being written like crazy. This can't happen. You're changing comic history too much here.
But
it's quite ironic how that happened.
So whether it's social media or back then, of course, like, if you're really upset about something, you're going to be vocal about it. But if you love it, do you go out of your way to like, wow, like I'm going to write a really nice letter? Like, no, everyone's like, oh, I'm going to write a really mean letter. I'm going to post a nasty review. Like, it's easy to see the negativity.
Yes.
But like you don't get the positive feedback unless you really look for it.
That was with
unfortunately.
me. It's like my positive feedback is I discovered back issues. It's like, how am I going to get the black suit Spider-Man? Do you mean during this era where the red and blue suit was forced back on to readers again? And, I realized that after getting my haircut one time with my dad, there on the way home, there was a bookstore that said comics. I said, Dad, we got to stop. This is cool. Comic shop. I've never seen a comic shop before.
Yeah.
And we go in and it was all books up front, but then the back of it was a place called Bubba's Comics. And they had all kinds of comics, back issues, new books, price guides, just everything you can think of. That's like, what is this? And I said, hey, do you have any black suit Spider-Man stuff? And they go, oh, yeah. And all of a sudden, like, start pulling out all this stuff to show me because it was still 1984.
Yeah.
But I go, which one's the first appearance? Where's the story start? And they pull out 252 and showed it to me. And it said $4 on the cover price. I'm going, $4? These things are supposed to be 60 cents. They start off at 60 cents. Some of them become collectible, and the harder they get to find, the more valuable they become. And this is the price that this comic is worth now. And I go, how do I know you're not ripping me off? I think it's like a little 9-year-old kid trying to ask all these questions.
Look at you, Mr. Businessman.
Well, it's just like that. I said too, money was, you didn't have a lot of money as a kid. And something 60 cents you can afford, but something $4 back then is like, that's a huge, 6.5 times the price on the cover. That's a huge back issue back then.
Absolutely.
And they showed me like, well, there's these price guides that are out, like Overstreet. It's not in Overstreet yet because it's still the same year. Those come out once a year. But this thing called Comics Value Monthly is where we get our price information from. And I go, okay, that's kind of cool. It's like that. Can I see? Can you show me what you're talking about? And they showed me, and it like showed like a little black arrow going up.
Also sounds like they were really patient with you if you were 9 years old.
That's what's kind of weird.
Get out of here, kid.
Comic shops back then didn't have a whole lot of people, shopping at one time. It was still a little bit of a niche fan base.
Oh yeah,
especially here in Phoenix, because we're not New York City or LA. It was just a small time bookstore where this guy liked comics. And ironically, the guy that started Bubba's Comics in there was from New York. And there's a fun story to this too, is he eventually became the original owner of Atomic Comics.
Interesting.
And so it was kind of funny to see, like when I walked into Atomic Comics when I was in high school, it's like that guy that used to help me in the comic shop over on 24th Street Indian School ended up starting Atomic Comics. And that was kind of a fun little piece of history. But it was interesting because they were willing to work with a kid that seemed interested. And I don't know if that's because he had the connection of he remembered being that same way or what, but he saw a kid that was interested in not just reading new comics, but wanted to find out the history, or who knows
I think that's great. And it's cool that they were patient enough to do that. Like that's awesome.
Yeah. Back issues became part of my life after that.
Back issues. I mean, like these are all the classic stories, and there's so much fun stuff in there. Like I think the modern stuff, we're so caught up in movies now.
Yes.
That like they're just doing whatever, and they just need to retcon everything or do something for the sake of the movie. And like, these are where all the first appearances lie, or there's even silly stuff like this one I pulled out is a Marvel team up featuring Spider-Man and the not ready for primetime players. And
so awesome. That's
the SNL cast for those of you who don't know. And there's John Belushi on the cover.
Samurai Chef. I remember that.
So this has been a few years since I've read this, and you remember a little more than I did. But it looks like the Avengers were guest starring on SNL, and they get attacked by Silver Samurai.
Yes. Hey, dude, there's only one samurai in the Saturday Night Live crew, and who's going to step up? James Belushi as Samurai Chef to take on Silver Samurai, which was very, very hilarious and kind of ironic that was the storyline plot they used in there.
This is a comic I remember my dad having as a kid, and like I remember reading it back then. So like I'm pretty sure I found this in like a dollar bin or something, and I just, for nostalgia, really is the only reason I bought it, because it's a pretty silly premise, just an excuse to have Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi and Bill Murray and whoever else. Oh, and Stan Lee himself, of course, because there's a huge Stan Lee cameos in here. He's dancing with one of the cast members, it looks like. But I mean, it's just silly good stuff, you know?
Yeah, it's like that. I'm trying to remember what the connection was with NBC and Marvel at that time. Like
NBC
that, if there was,
and Marvel,
because that was obviously an NBC crossover.
Yeah,
in that Marvel team up, and they had to do some kind of negotiation with Saturday Night Live and NBC to get that story told.
Now I don't know.
That'd be a fun history to look up.
do you remember that SNL skit where, well, they had DC characters in there too, so it probably wasn't a deal, but do you remember that SNL skit where it's a superhero party?
Yes.
And they're all talking about their powers, like, so let me get this straight. It's like you shrink down to the size of an ant, but I don't remember this because Ant-Man was there, and it was just, they were, just making fun of everything, but yeah, I don't know, that would be interesting to see how this kind of came to be.
Kind of fun stuff to look up on that. And but yes, dude, it's like that. Marvel team ups were some of the most fun individual standalone stories that are easy access for any new comic reader to check out, because it's always Spider-Man, know, which is their flagship character.
And that was my whole argument for the Sony deal not working out being stupid, because like Spider-Man is really fun by himself, but he's also a lot of fun with other characters, and like the crossover stuff is so much fun, especially when it's Blade or Ghost Rider or Punisher or whoever. Like, I mean, there's just so many fun stories to be had.
Yeah, and it's easy, like using some character that is well represented by Marvel, an easy access character that everybody understands, to introduce you to other characters that Marvel has.
Absolutely.
And I used to love Marvel Team Up for that reason too. It's like that, I wonder what this Moon Knight character is. And, it's like, okay, cool. Spider-Man and Moon Knight. Read that. That's really cool. I want to read more Moon Knight.
Yeah.
And even Spider-Man and Nomad, Captain America's sidekick. And I'm going, what? It's like that. This character's okay. I don't want to read any more. You know what I mean? And it was just, it was a really, really fun series to give you that gateway. Like Havoc. I became a Havoc fan by reading Marvel Team Up number 69, if I remember correctly, on that. And it was them versus the Living Monolith. And I thought that was really freaking awesome. And John Byrne did the art in that too. And I was already a John Byrne fan.
Yeah, and there's another abstract character that, like the everyday person may not be familiar with.
Yeah, it's like that. They did an Apocalypse story. That was a Marvel graphic novel that the Living Monolith kind of brought Apocalypse to modern era.
Yeah.
So but that was my first experience with the Living Monolith. And I went back and started looking more at that. And it's like, oh, that's funny too, because they used Havoc's origin was part of the original Living Monolith story back in X-Men. Back with Roy Thomas and Neil Adams. And so it was kind of a return of the Living Monolith. And since Havoc had that experience, it was a great Marvel team up, Spider-Man and Havoc. And then number 70, they couldn't defeat Living Monolith by themselves, so they brought in Thor, and Thor helped them defeat the Living Monolith in number 70. It's like, if all else fails, call up Thor.
Yeah.
God of Thunder.
That's for sure.
Exactly, dude. So, the stories were simple, at the most 2-part stories, but they were fun stories to read.
Oh, yeah. And, also reading even comics I'm going to call them earlier comics as late as the 90s, there was actually also so much more to read.
Yes.
Like I could flip through a modern comic like nothing, but like I recently was like rereading like the Dark Phoenix saga. And it's like, here we are at the X Mansion where we find this. And, it's a day like not any normal day and blah, blah, blah. And setting the scene. And it's really long. And
the smells of cupcakes in the air inside the bakery shop.
Exactly.
Colossus is hungry, but Wolverine says we don't have time. Right?
There's so much setup and just narration. It's interesting how like the art of comic book storytelling has evolved,
Absolutely.
through the years. So that's another really neat thing. You're just going through the back issues, whether it's 60s comics, 70s comics, 90s, 80s, all that. What else did you dig up for us in your bin?
Well, it's like the more modern one that I think is kind of a fun read, but it only went 8 issues because they had to get into DC Rebirth. Was Superman, Lois, and Clark.
Okay.
In Convergence, they more or less had a storyline where there was a Clark Kent there that ended up being the pre-52 Superman.
That ended up being the pre-52 Superman.
Because in 52, after Flashpoint, they started the new 52.
Yep.
And I guess more or less what they decided with that timeline was that there was a convergence of different realities.
Okay.
And so Superman, Lois Lane got married in the reality that was pre-52.
Okay.
But in the new 52, there was not that same type of relationship. Superman started getting a relationship with Wonder Woman, and Lois Lane kind of was just a sexual tension for him.
Okay.
And so it was referring to the fact that the 52 is just more or less a reality, and that there is multiple still dimensions of the DC universe. And in the 52 different dimensions, there was a convergence, and after the convergence was over, the pre-52 Superman was inserted into the 52 universe with Lois and their son, which was the big deal, Jonathan Kent.
Yeah.
And Jonathan Kent is now Superboy inside of the DC universe.
Okay.
Out of Super Sons, where it's Damian Wayne and Jonathan Kent.
Yeah.
That's now part of regular DC mainstream continuity.
Huh.
So that miniseries that was 8 issues that came out of a Convergent Superman 2-part story is now that gateway Lost series that introduces Super Son to the DC universe.
Yeah.
And so it was a fun little series. It's like kind of the Superman Lois and Clark is what it was called.
Yeah.
It's more or less based off Jonathan realizing that he's special and he's actually the future Superboy of the DC universe. And so that's kind of a fun little series on that too. It's only 8 issues. Dan Jurgens, ironically, the guy that killed Superman, the Doomsday story writer.
Yeah, yeah.
He's the guy that wrote the story. So it's something like, I guess, since he killed Superman the first time, because in the start of the story, he's wearing a black Superman suit where he first came back after being dead during the Doomsday Wars.
Yeah.
And since Superman Clark Kent is still part of the new 52 universe at that point, which ended up dying at one point, which led to this Superman becoming the main Superman again, which is, I know DC mind screws that kind of like, oh, why do I even want to read this?
Yeah.
But DC tends to do this whole, how can we work things into reality when we want to create a new character? They just kind of force it in. You know what I mean, dude?
Yeah.
And this story was that bridge to bringing a new Superboy to the DC universe that was the son of Lois and Clark.
Yeah, it's just a shame that because the Death of Superman is, a classic, story. Whether you like Superman or not, it's fun because you either get to see Superman die because you don't like Superman, or it's just a milestone for you as a Superman fan because it's just a major
a major point in Superman history.
So, I mean, to me, like, it covers everyone.
Yes.
That's, I don't like Superman. So, like, I think I get a kick out of seeing Doomsday kill him.
Yes.
And to get a movie adaptation, would be awesome. And it's unfortunate that they kind of rushed and stuck it in there when this should have just been a Batman versus Superman movie.
Yes.
And then, like, okay, let's also do Death of Superman. Like, what a waste. Because you could have even had him come back in the black costume, which from what I understand, I thought there was rumors that they initially shot it that way, and then they reshot it without the black suit, I guess.
That way, I guess they figured
Justice League.
People want to understand what was going on, type of thing.
Why do you need to explain? Like, people were worried about like
the stupidest stuff.
Like, you don't have to explain it. Like, it's just clothes.
Just let it happen. Let the story.
Do you explain where all your clothes come from?
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter. I mean, Zod had a black Superman looking suit, didn't he? Like, can you just take Zod's clothes and call it a day? Who cares?
Yes. And so Superman was wearing this black and silver suit in this Lois and Clark story because the 52 Superman was still alive until the end of 52.
Okay.
And when DC Rebirth happened, they did a story where Superman died again, but it was the new 52 Superman. And then in Rebirth, Lex Luthor tried to come in to be the new Superman. And he created his own super suit. Mm-hmm. And this Clark Kent always knew Lex Luthor as being evil villain. But this Lex Luthor of the Rebirth and New 52, DC Flashpoint, post-Flashpoint Lex Luthor was a little bit more altruistic and joined the Justice League. And so when he put on the Superman outfit, it pissed off, angered the Superman that was pre-52 because they were always nemesises. And so he went to show up to try to come out like, oh my gosh, dude, this is dangerous to have Lex Luthor acting as Superman. And so he more or less had to come out of hiding to prove that Superman was still around, whether or not that other one was dead or not. And so that's how they integrated Superman back into the DC Superman storytelling. So he was the first bridge of kind of saying the new 52 doesn't need to be. And the rebirth is kind of the rebirth of the DC universe at one point. Yes, during the story, there was the Superman that was pre-52 and the same universe as the one that was the regular 52.
I mean, I collect and read comics, and like that's incredibly confusing for.
It is. I think that's why DC decided like we need to clean this up a little bit.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yes, and so that was the main objective was I think to introduce Super Son, but they needed to clean up their continuity by doing so. And so pretty insane storytelling.
Yeah.
But Dan Jurgens and that's, Lee Weeks, it's good. It's a good, fun story if you just want to read an 8-issue story that doesn't involve a lot of other Superman stuff. It's a good introduction to Superman. It's a way to kind of get into how did they develop this character. And it's a very, very quick, easy 8-issue read of reading the origin of Jonathan Kent.
Huh. Yeah. No. Wow. That was a lot to digest.
Yes.
I didn't even know about that. And that wasn't even too long ago.
Yeah. It came out 2016, 15.
Okay.
Yeah. The late 2000 to December 2015 is the cover date of this issue. And it went 8 issues. And that kind of was the lead in for Rebirth.
Oh, some of my favorite back issue comics are the what ifs.
Yes.
And oh my gosh, like there's just so many good ones.
Yes.
I have a few older ones I pulled out that I don't even remember buying. And one of them that we kind of flipped through before we started recording is what if Nova had been 4 other people?
Was he Moon Knight?
Yeah, right. So little hard to understand. First, this girl named Helen Taylor becomes Nova, which you thought it was Nova's girlfriend, right?
Yeah, I said too. It's like that. I've never read too much Nova in the 70s, but that would be my guess. Is like they're trying to say, okay, is it just who that character has to be someone in the Marvel universe?
Yeah,
and or else like no one would understand reading that what if of like there's got to be probably the connection to the real person that was Nova in there. But that's my guess is that she was Nova's original girlfriend or love interest in the Nova TV or Nova comic series back in the 70s. Because when did that come out? 1979, 1980?
This one, yeah, 79.
What's her name again, too?
Her name is...
And excuse us not being knowledgeable on every little inch of the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, I think that's...
But it has expanded drastically over the years. And especially rewriting Nova's storytelling.
Helen Taylor. But of course, they had to do Spider-Man. And like the Spider-Man one is just so lame. Aunt May dies at the beginning. And then he gets the Nova powers. And he like accidentally gives a heart attack to Uncle Ben's burglar that kills him. And then he's like, oh, lock me up. I killed someone. My powers are cursed. But he's just so whiny. Like
that was my favorite
incredibly disappointing. And without sitting here reading all these words, looks like for some reason Peter Parker is also in a wheelchair in the beginning. Is it because he does get bit by a spider.
It makes him sick or something like that, right? In there, almost.
It's weird. Too much to consume right now. But the most confusing one is they jump right into this 4th story, and we sat here and we were reading it, and we couldn't figure out if it was Nick Fury or not. Like it's just a guy with a cigar, and he is obviously corrupted, and they're on a secret headquarters, on an elite, undetectable station, and he's teamed up with villains like Red Skull and Doctor Doom, and I think the Grey Gargoyle. It looks like they defeated all of Earth's heroes, and they don't call him by name. Like he's wearing the Nova costume, and he's just sitting there chomping on a cigar. I mean, it's probably safe to assume it's Nick Fury, but I don't see them calling Fury by name, which is pretty weird.
It looks like I'm looking at Helen Taylor. It's like she was an original character made for that story.
Really? Okay,
Yeah,
so it's
that's
nobody.
kinda-
Okay,
yeah.
well,
I'm going,
that
like, why have I not seen this character
okay. Well,
before?
there you go. That's why you didn't know.
Yeah, it's like that just said Helen Taylor's life was turned upside down when a mugger murdered her husband. She vowed that the man who killed her husband would pay. However, as months would carry on, there would be
That's according to
the Marvel database.
interesting.
So it's, I guess, even, characters that were for one shot what ifs
Yeah,
can become a Nova.
I mean,
I mean?
yeah, why not? I don't think that's the first time they've done that and made up characters for that. Another one I have here is
So Donny Cates, if you want to do something epic, bring in this new Nova.
yeah, right. From an alternate universe.
Because
This one I have here is also what if the Hulk had the brain of Bruce Banner?
yes,
So what if number 2?
that almost became a real story during the Peter David, or similar. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's obviously different for the what if,
Yeah.
but Peter David played with that a lot during his run on the Incredible Hulk.
That's all the Professor Hulk stuff. I mean, we
Yes.
saw them adapt that in Endgame. Like,
Yes,
Hulk has had so many different stages of his being Hulk, if you will. Like, there was the smart Hulk, and then he went off and he was a gangster for a while as
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Fix-It.
and John Byrne did that for a period of time too, with Doc Samson more or less splitting Banner physically from the Hulk for the first time.
Yep.
And it was like pretty interesting stuff. Like, that was more or less the mindless Hulk was just Bruce Banner being outside of the Hulk for the first time and be on his own. They created the Hulkbusters. But then Peter David took it to the next level of merging, the minds together, with Dale Keown doing the art on that too as well back in the day, who was the guy who co-created Pitt, or the guy that was the creator of co-creator Pitt. I'm trying to remember the writer that was writing it with him at that time. Brian Haberlin. I'm trying to remember the guy that was the writer of the Pit too at Image.
I have no idea.
But it's very much like Image's version of the Hulk, except they made the Pit an alien from space.
Yeah.
And Timmy was a little kid that sat on his shoulder and tried teaching him how to be human. It's almost like the Bruce Banner, being a physical manifestation.
I know what you're talking about. I remember when that came out, right?
Yeah, 1992, 93.
Yeah.
And it was really cool, but instead of it being like a scientist, it was this little kid that was more or less mentoring this big, almost like Lobo and the Hulk mixed together, great warrior monster that came to Earth. And Timmy says, no, you can't act that way here.
Did they reboot that though? Like in the early 2000s or something?
They have,
or had like a new, number 1 kind of a thing. Cause I feel like I had like a promotional issue, and I remember him like walking around the sewers, and I think he had the kid on his shoulder kind of a thing.
They did do a Hulk Pit one shot.
I just remember something right around 2000, 2001. And I was like, who is this Pit guy? I mean, it doesn't really matter. It was right before I started shopping at Royal Collectibles in New York.
Nice.
I was probably actually like a year ago now, but my wife showed me a picture of Joe Quesada at a comic shop in New York, and it was Royal Collectibles. I was like, oh my gosh, like that was my comic shop, like
That
when I
is
lived in Queens, and it was cool to see Joe Quesada just buying stuff from there, and taking a picture, in front of that storefront. Like I used to go there all the time, and buy comics and Hero Clicks and whatever else, that was just neat to see.
How cool was it living in like the backyard of comics origins? I guess the like New York Marvel, Stan Lee's New York Marvel universe.
I know Phoenix kind of has a dense population of comic book shops, but I mean, Royal was like our main one for a while. Like we did shop at other ones, and then there was one. I'm gonna get the names mixed up because they changed. I don't know if it went from Chameleons to Hurricane or Hurricane to Chameleons.
Okay.
But that was another comic shop that was in. It was in like next to a fancier neighborhood, right along. It was called. We called it Austin Street. I don't remember the exact. All the crossroads in that area, but it was what do you call it, like when it's an area full of like shopping and banking and
just like a metroplex looking type of thing of it, or
it was on
like a shopping mall,
not a shopping mall, but just like a major
like a strip mall
hub
there?
for working and shopping and like almost like a mini downtown kind of, anyway, like, I'm saying, but that place was cool, like I collected Dragon Ball Z stuff back in the day, so like they had more of like that, and like even some of like the Japanese figures, which was really cool to find, at that time period. But like another thing that really attracted me to Marvel as a kid, as opposed to DC, was they were taking place in New York. Like Spider-Man was from Queens. I lived in Queens. Yeah, so like.
Did you ever go visit the house where they say was the house that
I
modeled
didn't. Peter Parker
I didn't
Aunt May's
know.
House? I didn't know that
House?
that was the thing.
Yeah. So remember when the Spider-Man movie came out, they more or less researched the address.
Interesting.
Of where Peter Parker really lived inside the comics, and there actually was an address location that they kind of say is the house that is the actual address that Stan Lee used for Aunt May and Uncle Ben's house.
Yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me. My uncle, lived in Westchester.
Nice.
So like, it's where the X-Men.
Oh, yes, you're right. Yeah.
Is in Westchester, New York. It's a little, as you start to go upstate there, Captain America's from Brooklyn.
Yes.
It's really relatable, and I don't know if I've said this on the podcast yet or not, but it was a real trip watching Iron Man 2, because like that entire movie took place in the park across the street from where I grew up.
That's awesome.
It was a Flushing Meadow Park.
Right
that's
there.
where the Stark Expo was, like that globe with the fountain. Like I used to walk past that thing all the time. Like I was like, why did they film this here after I moved away? Like this is across the street from my house. Like no exaggeration. Like literally across the street, and then that's the park. That's where Shea Stadium is, where the New York Mets play baseball. So I think like that connection too, like is just it's really fun.
Yeah,
like you can't go to Metropolis or Star City or Jump City or Gotham. Like you just kind of have an idea of what they're maybe based on. So like I just think that's something a little more relatable that Marvel kind of plays to.
Yeah, it's like a personal bond with the people in that community.
Yep.
I mean, it's ironic because like just to show you how tight that is, it's like I was excited when I was a kid when I discovered there was a character called Phoenix.
Oh, yeah.
And it's no relation whatsoever.
Well, that's okay.
But to the city, other than the fact that, hey, I live in a city named Phoenix. Tell me more about this character. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was Firestar when I first saw her.
That's funny.
Because Spider-Man is Amazing Friends was the cartoon I used to watch every Saturday with Firestar, Iceman, and Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. And I go like that, oh, dude, how much is the comic with Firestar on it? Because they didn't say Phoenix on the cover. Yeah. It was just, do you know what I mean? It's like that. She goes like that. That's not Firestar. And I go, okay, like who is that then? It looks like Firestar. Well, it's the Dark Phoenix. It's like, oh, the color scheme on the costume's similar.
Yeah.
And it's got red hair.
Redhead.
Yeah.
How many fire redheads are
exactly. And they go, it's like that. No, it's like that. That's Jean Grey. Firestar, the character you're talking about, doesn't exist in comics yet.
What a trip.
And yeah, isn't that crazy? So X-Men number 193 was her first appearance, and that was in 1985. And in 1984 was when I was in this comic shop seeing this Dark Phoenix saga on the wall, because it was a big deal storyline. I mean, it was 4 years old at that point, but that became like an iconic part of X-Men history, the death of Dark Phoenix, the death of Jean Grey.
Yeah.
And that was like, wow. It's like, okay. So it was pinned up on the wall. And so it was like, piqued my interest. All of a sudden I became, a Jean Grey fan right there. And that's because it reminded me of the city that I lived in and had nothing connection whatsoever. It's just, they said, oh yeah, Phoenix is the bird that rises from the ashes. Like Jean Grey died and she came back as this Phoenix force. And they started explaining it to me and go, okay, cool. So I wanted to read the Dark Phoenix saga. So next thing I know is I'm into the X-Men, and Alpha Flight, John Byrne, was the artist that drew the Dark Phoenix saga. And my stepbrothers at the time had an Alpha Flight issue that I read of a character named Guardian that was the leader of Alpha Flight. Yep. And it was a story flashing back to when he was alive.
Okay.
And this character was awesome. He tore through the X-Men. It was kind of an Alpha Flight number 17. And it showed him tearing through the X-Men almost by himself until he pissed off Colossus and Banshee. Do you know what I mean? It's like that. He fired at Colossus, bounced off it, and hit Moira McTaggart. Then Banshee unloaded on him.
Wow.
And so it's like, whoa, it's like that dude. Then all the X-Men started regrouping because he was trying to pick him off one at a time to try to get Wolverine back to Canada. And I'm going, damn, this character's awesome. The white and red suit.
That was your first experience with Guardian.
Yes. And I'm going, same thing too. It was like that. I needed to read back issues because that story was Heather Hudson, his wife who survived his death, and Wolverine, the family best friend, reflecting on some of the better times of James McDonald Hudson.
Okay.
And I'm going, back issues. I need to read those too now.
Yeah.
And that made me a huge Alpha Flight fan. I remember for Christmas in 1985, I got Alpha Flight 1 through 20 off of one of those order form catalogs.
Nice.
That Dad is like, this is what I want for Christmas. You want comics for Christmas. That's it. Oh yeah, I want to read what happened, all of the Alpha Flight 1 through 20. And that's what I got for Christmas.
Is
that
1
year.
through 20 that whole run for that, or
that was
just the beginning?
It was 1 through 12 was the major story.
Okay.
And then 13 through 20 was like the fallout. And then I was pretty much caught up.
Okay.
I'm getting the issues
I
at my local comic shop.
Okay.
And it was like they had the group 1 through 20, I think, for something like $25.
Wow.
But if I wanted to get them individually, it would have cost a lot of money on it. And I said, hey, this is what I want for Christmas.
Nice.
And so that was the first mail order catalog purchase that I made out of a comic book, or my parents made out of a comic book for Christmas that year. But yeah, 1 through 12 of Alpha Flight is pretty intense reading, because in their incarnation in the X-Men, issue 139 and 140 was the last appearance of Alpha Flight as a team before they started their own book, because that's when Wolverine and Nightcrawler traveled to Canada to visit with his friends, James and Heather Hudson.
Yeah.
And that kind of established more of like that, hey, the Canadian government is not coming after you anymore. Like they made like the whole thing like where he's an X-Man, that's fine. And so the Canadian government gave up on trying to get Wolverine back to be part of the Weapon Alpha program. But so he went to visit again. He does say, hey, I want to introduce you to some of my friends. And he's like that. He wants to take some time off, take a vacation from the X-Men. And Nightcrawler said, hey, I'll go with you. Damn, I need a vacation too. And it's something, why not? So they go up into Canada and they catch up with James and Heather Hudson. And he introduces them to both like Shaman and Snowbird. So like they remembers once again they were of the Alpha Flight program too at that time. And it was kind of like a little Alpha Flight reunion. Well, Wendigo attacks where they're at. And so it kind of goes full circle, because Wolverine first appeared in the same issue as a Wendigo story, which was kind of cool, the Hulk. And so it was Wolverine and Nightcrawler and Alpha Flight members against the Wendigo. And that was kind of a fun story. But at the story ended, that the Prime Minister of Canada sends a letter to Guardian, the leader of Alpha Flight, saying that the Canadian government did not approve the budget for Alpha Flight being funded through government anymore. And so Alpha Flight kind of disbanded. And then in Alpha Flight number 1, Krakoa, type of thing called Tundra. Are you familiar with Tundra at all?
No.
Okay. Tundra was one of what they call the Great Beast. Canada, John Byrne used a bunch of legends of like Canada to make the villains of Alpha Flight. So it's not typical Marvel villains. And Tundra was more or less a god that was able to possess the Canadian tundra and make it into like a Swamp Thing type of form. And he attacked Canada, and Guardian went out by himself, and his wife says, dude, you can't do this alone. So she's the one that put together the team of Alpha Flight again without, Guardian even knowing. And there was like beacon cards that they could communicate with each other on. And she plugged the beacons into the computer to send out a radio signal to connect with the rest of the former members of Alpha Flight. And Alpha Flight was reformed, they defeated Tundra, and that's how the Alpha Flight comic got started as its own series. Well, after that story went for a few issues, they started going their separate ways again, because there was nothing that was a threat to the Canadian land. And so they more said, hey, like, when you guys, when we need to be a team, we're a team, but started focusing on the other characters, like the relationship between Aurora and Sasquatch, and the fact that North Star couldn't stand his twin sister, more or less manipulating Walter Lankowski into faking that was something that was a real relationship. It was really kind of weird comic book storytelling that was so much more cerebral than your regular, I guess that's why I say I hate, with all due respect to DC Comics back in the 1980s, they were very aimed towards kids. And I felt Marvel Comics were more aimed towards like real life issues that people were exploring. And John Byrne did a really good job of humanizing a lot of these characters. And Guardian, even though like that the team was broken up, he got a job interview in New York City and went to take the job interview, and it was just a setup for an or a peer of his that helped develop the suit that he wore to try to sell to the American government as weaponry.
Oh.
And Guardian did not want that to happen.
Yeah.
And so that other guy got exposed and was fired. And then that guy became a rival of James McDonald Hudson and set up this interview, not James McDonald Hudson getting interviewed by Roxxon Oil, which was an American technology company. And it ended up being a setup by that guy to try to kill off Guardian. And then that was more or less at the end of the story. They defeated Omega Flight, which was the Alpha Flight members that weren't brought in because there was no more government funding. And he more or less formed the team of the cast-offs like Wild Child and Diamond Lil. Let me see, to Box, which ended up becoming an Alpha Flight member later.
Okay.
And they attacked Alpha Flight. And there was this guy that I'm forgetting his name right now, which is Duplicate. I can't remember his name, but he could duplicate himself into multiple people.
Yeah.
Kind of like Matrox, the multiple man.
Yeah.
And but every time one of them died, it would be closer to his own death because it was one of his own duplicates. So that was kind of a cool character that John Byrne created too. But in Alpha Flight number 12 was a big fight between Alpha Flight and Omega Flight, and Box, the robot, was being controlled by Nathan, the guy that was nemesis of Guardian. And he's more or less brings him down an elevator shaft, and more or less it was their final battle. And Box, like Guardian, helped the guy that designed the robot, the failsafe. So he remembered where the failsafes were, and he ripped the wires out of the robot, and it exploded. But it's mentally controlled, not physically. There's no one physically in the robot. And so when it exploded, it damaged Guardian's suit. And at the end of like the elevator shaft, Guardian's trying to deactivate his suit before it blows up. And it's the countdown on the last couple pages, like 10, 9, 8, and every little number's got a different art piece of him trying to dismantle this mechanism in his suit. And then on the number 1 second, a door opens and it's his wife. Well, it's like, oh my gosh, I found you. It's like, oh, then boom, he blows up right in front of her. And I'm going, oh my God, dude, that is the most dark thing I've ever seen of a superhero comic in my life. And then that's the fallout of her having to deal with what she witnessed, and the fact of now she's got to put together and be the leader of Alpha Flight on her own going forward. And to me, it's like going, what? It's
so that's
like,
why she became Guardian, right?
Because the robot, there was a robot that Nathan, the guy that attacked Guardian, was his assistant that was babysitting Heather, being more or less the what do you say? Like when someone goes in for a job interview, the wife gets entertained, you know, like while the job interview is going on, like when they more or less bring you into the community and show you what it's like and try to encourage your spouse to be interested in wanting to make that life move for you and your family.
Oh, I don't know.
But that's what she was supposed to be, this robot. And then at the end, like, Heather's, this is not right. And then all of a sudden the video popped up with the guy that was the villain telling Heather, it's like that, this is my revenge against your husband. It's like that, we're going to watch him get killed. And they started doing a broadcast of the fight going on between Alpha Flight and Omega Flight.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty intense story that John Byrne tells. These deep stories you don't expect out of like any regular, superhero, supervillains, blah, like robbing a bank or trying to take over the world. These were like ground level storytells that were insanely
I see why
good.
like this would be a really good start for the MCU to, start with, just the First Class, start with Alpha Flight, set up Weapon X and Department H and K
such good stories.
And all that. And it would be cool to even go as far as killing Guardian or Vindicator like that and have it be, an impact and, use that program to introduce Wolverine, have him fight Hulk, in a flashback, like the rights are all in the same place. Like it would be so cool to get some kind of something that's similar to the first appearance of Wolverine, in Hulk 181, and then they're fighting Wendigo, I think, and all that. That would be really neat.
Dude, tell these early stories that they've never even been told. You can do it in the movies.
Absolutely.
In a way of like, what was Wolverine doing with Alpha Flight before Professor X showed up? And then as I said too, you can even have like if it's Alpha Flight a TV series or Alpha Flight the movie like that, where it's kind of the setup of Wolverine going through the Alpha Flight program until Professor X shows up at the end of the movie to recruit him into the X-Men. But then even, what brings Wolverine back into the Alpha Flight movie story is that whole thing where it opens up of you introduced Guardian and Alpha Flight when Wolverine was still a member. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it opens up the Alpha Flight movie and you do see this team like really gel together, but it is in their biggest fight of their life and they do lose their leader. And then Wolverine's brought to help Heather be brought up to be like the Alpha Flight's going to go on and you're going to be the person that helps guide it, because Mac did have a dream to protect this country. And he technically was the Captain America of your country. Yeah. And you can do that too, because you were more or less, you're his partner more than any other team member. You were his wife.
Yeah. And no one really touched on what was going on in Canada anyway. You can keep all of these isolated anyway, since apparently, they're very Canada centric stories and mythologies, these could be, maybe even pre-Infinity War and then, lead right into, post-Infinity War.
Yeah, modern day stuff.
Yeah, maybe after Guardian dies or something. There's so many things that they can do. Like it's the prospect is, it's pretty fun to think about.
Yes. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, no, for sure. But another thing that really attracts me to the what ifs is, sometimes they present ideas that actually just make it canon.
Yes.
Or into the canon, I should say. Look at Jane Foster's Thor. That was a what if first, and now it happened.
Yep. Yeah, that's like a lot of like the what ifs. Like it's funny like that how modern writers are. Why can't we? It's like it's almost like that. It's a secondary series they should start up. Is like why not? You know what I mean, dude? And then they kind of recap all of like the what if stories and do a combine, like a double size, like the Marvel Tales books that have been coming out this year for the 80th anniversary of Marvel. Yeah. Like do a why not series. That's 12 issues of the 12 stories that were used in what ifs that Marvel brought into their mainstream storyline.
That's pretty funny.
Like that what if number 10 with Jane Foster became Thor. Then at the, that's the first story. And then obviously they have Thor number 1 be the story that it actually did happen in the Marvel Universe. It's a 2-part book. It's like a flip book almost. Yeah, on the front is the what if, and then on the back is like the why not, and it's got Thor number 1, and some other fun stuff like that too. Didn't they do it with Scar, son of Hulk?
Okay,
they did a what if where Scar was introduced in the what if as the son of Hulk that was from Planet Hulk.
Oh,
and then eventually, shortly after that, they did do Scar as an ongoing series.
Yeah, I didn't. Scar was originally in a what if?
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it was one of the ones like in the past 10, 15 years, they've been doing in what ifs is kind of like a month long promo, like where they have 5 different what if books would come out. And it's usually in December to kind of do some kind of like Christmas gift type of thing, maybe to what if fans. Who knows why they did it in December, but it was always towards the end of the year. And they would tie up their year with some fun, what if stories.
I didn't even realize that. But it does happen. Like it becomes canon. Even that Hulk, like they.
Yes. Another what if thing they brought into reality too was during Venomverse, the toxin characters.
Okay.
That was introduced in a what if story.
Really? And
they made that into reality too as well.
I didn't know that.
With the alien species that kind of merges with the both of the human and the host and makes both of them. They kind of like take over control of it. That was done in a what if story too. I think it was What If Spider-Man the Other. I think if I remember correctly on that one. And there's some other cool there's what ifs I know that they've touched on that are now part of Marvel continuity. And the Spider-Girl is like MC2 continuity, but that was what if number 105. They introduced the Mayday Parker, which was that Spider-Girl series for the MC2 universe.
Okay.
And that was going in the late 90s, and that went for over 100 issues. It was funny because they tried doing the whole Juggernaut Sun. That wasn't a separate thing once they started that universe, but almost like the 2099 type of thing of the late 90s. And so it's kind of fun to see like the other one too. What if Conan was in modern day times? Right now, Savage Avengers is happening right now. That's another what if.
That's right.
Yes.
And if you've never picked up a what if, they're definitely worth checking out. There's a lot of fun stories. Some of them are a little more whacked out. I think there's like a what if Aunt May was a Herald of Galactus.
That was actually a Marvel team up.
Silly. Was it?
Yes, which was
hilarious.
That's
not a what if?
Yeah, it was actually a Marvel team up. It was like, I think it was Assistant Editors Month, and where the editors could do just something that's just completely off the wall.
That might as well be a what if.
Yeah, it almost is a what if story, Marvel team up. Yes.
It was what if Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires.
Yes.
anything with like vampires and Dracula, like I think it's really cool. Like I know it's been played out a little bit in the last few years, but like the Marvel Dracula stuff, you know, is a lot of fun. A lot of Fantastic Four stuff's really cool. Like one of my favorite ones, it's a little more recent, was one of the Fantastic Four was, I think it was Spider-Man, Hulk, Ghost Rider, and Wolverine, I want to say. And it took place during the Infinity Gauntlet story. They were the Fantastic Four. And they, after the snap, they went to go confront Thanos. And I don't know if they fought or what the situation was, but, you know, like Mephisto was his right-hand man. And Wolverine's a little out of character, I'll admit, in this particular issue, because all of a sudden he starts to betray the rest of the Fantastic Four. And he's like, Thanos, like, what are you doing? Like, he's like the master of lies and you're having him be your advisor. And Thanos is like, you're right. And he just kills Mephisto, and he lets Wolverine like start telling him like all these things, and he's like betraying the rest of them. They're like, Wolverine, like what are you doing? And then, you know, eventually like Thanos is just listening to Wolverine and not paying attention. And Wolverine draws his claws and cuts off the Infinity Gauntlet off of Thanos' hand.
Nice.
So like another thing, like it was also Wolverine being very clever.
Yes.
Which I don't know, like maybe, I'm not saying Wolverine's like super dumb or anything, but that was awfully well thought out and manipulative.
Yes.
So like, but it was still fun.
Yes.
You know?
That's the too was like that. Anything can happen in What Ifs. I used to love how the Watcher would kind of say what really happened at first and then lead into the story. But in other times, things may be changed.
Yeah. And, you know, and I love that they seem to be keeping that route in the What If TV show.
Yes.
Because they did cast the Watcher. And, you know, I know he's just a voice actor. But I mean, since he is a voice actor and this is going to be a CG character, you know, as we apparently saw in Guardians 2 with all the Watchers, I would like to see him play Uatu within the rest of the MCU as well.
That would be epic.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Especially like when the Fantastic Four come around.
Did you ever read What If's replacement series?
No, what is that?
The Exiles.
Is that I have some Exiles comics because there's Deadpool's appearance.
Because What If kind of transitioned into Mutant X.
I didn't realize
Remember Mutant X? Because like they kind of, What Ifs, they're running out of ideas for a while. And so they decided to, okay, let's cancel the series because sales are down. And in Mutant X, Havoc was taken from the mainstream reality and thrown into an alternate reality, like where there was Bloodstorm and Madeline Pryor was still alive. And it was kind of like a dark X-Men universe.
Yeah.
And then Mutant X went for 12, 13 issues. And then they did, remember Blink? Mm-hmm. Okay, they did a Blink miniseries. And the Blink miniseries, at the end of it, led into being in another dimension. And she was given a Talus. And that Talus gave her access to the multiverse of Marvel. Huh. And it was supposed to be an X-Men story, more or less, at first, where she was also tossed 4 other X-Men from different realities. And their job was to kind of do like sliders where they slid from reality to reality, wherever the Talus took them, and save that universe from destruction. I
have a bunch of Exiles comics. I haven't had the chance to really get into them. I want to say like I have them because of Deadpool crossovers. I could be wrong.
Yeah, there was one, like there was a Deadpool Exile story where like it was it was Sabretooth and Deadpool. And there was a group of like more or less.
So that's why I have some of them, but I haven't had the chance to read those. But you know, anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up here?
No, it's pretty good. Have you enjoyed the show?
Yeah.
Back issues are fun.
Back issues are fun. And you know what? I think we're going to keep talking about back issues, and we'll keep this as an ongoing smaller segments. Maybe we'll start highlighting, you know, once every few episodes. I think it'll be fun. But Ken, like, how can we find out more about you and Drawn to Comics?
Yeah, come in the shop. Drawn to Comics is located in downtown Glendale, 5801 West Glendale Avenue. We're on Instagram and Facebook a lot, promoting some of the cool stuff that's coming out. Halloween Comic Fest is coming up in October.
Yes.
So that's going to be a blast of a time, too. It's Free Comic Book Day 0.5, I like to call it.
Okay.
It's a smaller version of Free Comic Book Day, but it's a lot of fun. There's artists, there's costumes, there's music. It's always a good time.
Very cool.
And yeah, dude, it's going to be also, I just found out this week too, the library approached us about helping out with their Glendale Library Con.
Nice.
And that's going to be now moved from the Saguaro branch over off by GCC to the branch that's the Velma Teague branch that is literally right across the street from the store. And that's going to be the lead into Glendale Glitters that night.
Oh.
So that's going to be a fun convention library con.
Yeah.
And so we're excited about that. And we encourage any artists that are interested in coming down to reach out to either me or Greg Kinder, the person that is in charge of putting it together with us.
And that's coming up in October?
It's going to be December, actually. That one's December 5th.
Oh, that was December. Gotcha.
Yes, it'll be coming up
for
December,
Glendale Glitters.
Yes.
Got it.
And that'll be December 5th of Glendale Glitters. It's going to be from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. at the library. No, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. My apologies.
Very fun.
Because 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. is going to be the Halloween Comic Fest at the library. And then after 5 p.m. and it wraps up, it leads right into the Glitters event. There's going to be a lightsaber show, which would be pretty cool to kick off Glitters that night.
Yeah,
so some fun stuff. And I said too, we're pretty excited, and just stay tuned for more stuff on that, and definitely check that out.
And it's the social media at Drawn to Comics, all one word, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Of course, you can also follow Nightcap Chat at Nightcap Chat on Facebook and Twitter, and at Nightcap_chat on Instagram. I'm not sure. I just want to put it out there. I'm not sure why we did not get at Nightcap Chat on Instagram. So if you know who has that, I cannot find that person. Maybe we can get them to release it if we all band together here. You find more about my voice acting and producing adventures at Blade O'Neill on Instagram and Twitter, and at Blade O'Neill VO on Facebook. More recently, my voice was featured in a game that reached some success on Steam called Winds of Change. It's of the furry genre, but I believe it's all family friendly, kind of a point and click adventure, and we trended on Steam for a couple of days and even beat out the Westworld video game, which was pretty neat. It was fun to be a part of it. I know some of the other voice actors that were in that, but I mean, it was a good time, kind of a fantasy, type genre adventure. And we got some more things coming, which I can't talk about yet, but are really exciting.
Awesome.
But we appreciate you all taking the time to listen, making us part of your weekly escapades and routines. Once again, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends, and tell us on social media what you want to hear more about. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you all next week.
Thank you for listening.